I had a pizza for dinner.
How was the pizza?
It's a frozen pizza brand called Motor City Pizza.
I've had them. They're good.
It's a solid ass, nice
It's
and
a
fluffy Detroit style
yeah.
frozen pizza.
You can get
I'll
them at
show you
the
a photo.
Walmart and the Costco.
All right,
I'm
So
here.
pizza.
are we ready to go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna go boop 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 as a way to find that waveform, and then I'm gonna say, "Hello, good people, and welcome to Off the Deep End, a Deep Listens podcast where we cover role-playing video games in depth. I am your host, Braden Arbitrary Water Redacted, the powerhouse of the cell. Joining me, as always, is Chris Zombie Pie Redacted, the powerhouse of the cell.
I'm happy to share my fan fiction, which misrepresents the texts of evolutionary biology.
Also joining us, as sometimes, is Adam Borgmaster Redacted, the powerhouse of the cell.
I went to the top of the Chrysler building and all I got was a stupid t-shirt.
Yeah. I've never been to the Chrysler building.
I've seen the Chrysler building. I haven't been inside
I've
it.
seen there. When I went to New York, it was just a day trip. We saw Wicked on Broadway.
Wow. Did you hear the recent news that New York has lost its status as having the most rats in a city in the United States? They're like third or fourth. New Yorkers lost one of their crowns.
They lost their pride. They're like, "Oh, we had the best rats, the best bodegas, the best bagel water."
It apparently it's now Washington D.C.
Oh, sure. A rat-infested hellhole, am I right? Politics.
I mean, I was going to chime in that the worst part about going to the Chrysler building is that the floor layout keeps changing.
Yeah. I mean, it was created by demon worshippers. We learned this in the documentary Ghostbusters.
I thought that was the Empire. Okay.
Was it the Empire State Building?
I think
Yeah, it's the Empire State Building.
Yeah.
Oh, you can support this podcast on Patreon. $3 will give you access to our cool, mostly monthly anime podcast, the Oji-san Cast. We will be recording our episode on Boogie Pop Phantom, the 2000 anime, not the 2019 one. Probably by the time you hear this.
Yeah, in theory.
In theory.
We have some donation goals, too, to talk about.
Oh, boy, howdy do we. Now that we've played through Mass Effect Andromeda and subjected Gino and M to Mass Effect Andromeda, and also Pete, we're getting up on 50 Patreon members. Oji-san Cast tier counts for 2. If we get to 50 members, the main podcast will play Duke Nukem Forever, a game a person who plays bad video games constantly, thinks is irredeemable trash.
Yeah.
But Chris, what will we play if we reach 50 patrons?
We're playing a game that I would argue is probably worse, not morally, but mechanically. We'll be playing yet another example of Off the Deep End, playing a game that kills a franchise, in that we will be playing Lunar Dragon Song.
It's okay, they'll just remake Lunar 1 and 2 again for the rest of time.
Yeah. What a weird franchise. Speaking of weird not franchises, Parasite Eve.
Parasite Eve, that's the video game you picked for this podcast.
Yeah, uncharacteristically, rather than subject us to trash, I picked a game. Well, I did play a game. That is beloved by people who know
A
this game.
cult classic question mark. Uh, Parasite Eve came out for the Sony PlayStation on March 29th, 1998 in Japan. It came out on the Sony PlayStation on September 9th, 1998 in the United States. And then it was re-released on PSN in like 2011. Which is how I played it. So if you still have a working PlayStation 3 and are willing to add funds to your account online because you can't do it through the console anymore, you could play Parasite Eve right now.
Yeah, it sure seems like that PS3 port is the last time this has been playable on
It was
real
also in
hardware.
the Japanese PlayStation Classic.
Sure, but like the PSN network listing for this game dates back to 2010. So it is not
Yeah.
a recent release, and it's not
No.
even something that's going to be easily,
No.
pulled. It is a couple of firsts for then Squaresoft, but I guess we'll probably make the mistake of saying Square Enix. Um, this is Squaresoft's first full M-rated game. It is their first major American and Japanese project and collaboration. Sometimes people forget this fact, but this was the publisher on point was actually Square Electronic Arts, the weird period in which
Very
Square
short-lived.
didn't feel comfortable distributing their own games, even their own games in the United States. So they basically used Electronic Arts to be their point of distribution. Um, it actually worked out for a good part of the fifth generation of games. I don't know if the Square Electronic Arts label has popped up in anything you've booted up, Borgmaster, but this lasted for a genuine shocking amount of time. It is a horror RPG with a time limit featuring a adapted story that is based off of a book called Parasite Eve by Hideaki Senna, an
Wait,
actual pharmacologist and graduate student from Tohoku University.
a time limit?
And well, in theory, it's a 6 day span. Um,
This is
But
the chapter system that they call days.
yeah.
yeah.
Anyways, so this game's cool. It's
Oh,
it's a cool
rip.
game.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
It's also built upon a modified version of the Final Fantasy VII engine, which is
And
odd to think about, but I think
you,
that what
you can definitely see where they're working on what they're going to do with the character models in Final Fantasy VIII.
hmm Yeah, I think that they were
Yeah.
already close to releasing Final Fantasy VIII when this came out.
Like
So
a year.
98 is a year. Um,
Like a year,
so
year
this
and a
game
half.
still looks good contemporaneously. But you can tell that to see the jump from Final Fantasy VII to this, and it's still the same engine, you can tell that Squaresoft is getting more comfortable working with the PlayStation 1. And this was a big deal for Square because again, it's their like first attempt at like an actual M-rated game.
Yeah.
They brought their this is an A-team production. Like Hironobu Sakaguchi was the producer. The director Takashi Tokita was the person behind the lead designer behind Final Fantasy IV and the director for Live a Live and Chrono Trigger. So they put a good team on this game project. They had
Yes.
confidence in it, and it shows
Yeah.
because the final product is good.
This is I would classify this game as maybe the peak of Square's messing around period. Because there's a bit of that in the late SNES era, and there's and it basically goes away as soon as. What would you say is the last game in Square's we're just trying stuff era?
The bouncer.
Other than beloved game, the quiet. Yeah, is it the bouncer?
Yeah,
It's the bouncer.
because that blows up in their face. That's like their first.
Yeah.
That's their last experiment where they went on a limb and it kind of blew up in their face, and then they
Not
were
to be
like,
confused
okay,
with Square's modern messing around era, which has brought us such hits as The Quiet Man and fucking Dio Field Chronicle.
and a
I
game
was
that
set
they
to,
pulled the support on prematurely,
and
or
and all well, we're not
Babylon
even talking
Fall.
about their mobile trash. Babylon's Fall.
Foam Stars.
Foam Stars.
Oh, right.
This era of Square was taking
Valkyrie
some
Elysium.
risks, and
Yeah. And this is the game that I feel like pays them off the best. And I know all you brave Fencer Musashi stands, you Threads of Fate enjoyers out there shaking your fists at me.
I mean, those
you know
are
it's
bad
true.
fans. When they shake their fist at you, that it actually could be dangerous.
Yeah, God bless the ring.
God,
I mean,
ugh. I'm gonna have to play that game at some point.
yeah, you
I
will.
think that's a Jeff pick. That's definitely a Jeff pick because my idea of torturing Gino with a bad game in that on the Final Fantasy podcast is different. Anyways, yeah, no, like Square wasn't their diet was way more diverse than it is today. It's kind of weird looking at it, but it wasn't always remasters of bigger games or Final Fantasy games.
Yeah, no, they same year as this, they made Xenogears, they made
Was Einhander this year or 97?
was Einhander 98?
Uh
Bushido Blade 2, Brave Fencer Musashi. Oh, of course, Another Mind.
Oh, of course.
oh, right.
Everyone's favorite Squaresoft game.
Einhander is 97 in Japan, it's 98 in North
Okay.
America, so it's 1 year
Okay.
before this, but the English translation comes out a year on the same year as this. But anyways, well, Braden, let's continue a tradition that we've developed. Let's actually explain what this game is.
Okay.
So it is a role-playing game. And it has movement in a world map, which is a map of Manhattan. Your movement is limited, however, to specific destinations. You'll occasionally walk over hotspots, which then result in a random encounter or something, you materializing into a different battle arena. And then the battles here use a pause real-time combat system that relies on ATB meters.
It's real time with pause.
So it's like an odd real-time with pause, but meter-based, menu-based stuff.
So in combat, you are running around the arenas, which are the same pre-rendered backgrounds you run around the rest of the game in, except there are horrible monsters there. And you are waiting for your ATB meter to charge up, and so you can cast spells or more likely shoot things with guns. And so there's an element of dodging and moving around and avoiding enemy attacks because enemies hit pretty hard. And so it's as much a game about it. It's as actiony as they had gotten up to this point outside of like the Mana games.
It's actiony, but a lot because the combat is, I wouldn't say necessarily limited. It is arena based almost, like the combat is puzzly because you're not necessarily fighting a lot of different things or a lot of things on the field. It's really just you trying to figure out what are the easy outs with every encounter, what are the optimal strategies, which the game does provide the tools for you to do that. But especially when you start to move towards these the bosses in the game, it's a very set piece, puzzly oriented combat system
Yeah.
that actually works well. And it's tactical, and it's got bite to it. It's got a little grit to it that makes it fun to play
It also
and
has
level up these
it's a
characters.
really good battle theme.
Just an incredible soundtrack overall.
Yeah.
The
Hey.
composer is Yoko
Shimomura.
I know that there's another person at Squaresoft that gets a lot of credit for making legendary soundtracks, but maybe Yoko Shimomura is up there
As
or tied with them.
accomplished.
Yeah, because she's
She
behind
did this.
the entire Kingdom Hearts and Mario and Luigi series, and
Have you heard of Guile's theme?
Yeah, she also did a lot of she did some of the music for Street Fighter 2, and Live a Live was another production of hers. She did Xenoblade Chronicles, or some of the songs in Xenoblade Chronicles. Just like a universally regarded as like a legend in the video game music creation sphere. Like just an absolute fucking phenomenal musician.
No, she's a tremendous. It's a tremendous soundtrack.
Yeah, this is a good soundtrack. I've put things from this game into my my Spotify list, I'll say. But you can tell. I also read the same Peter Terrias Kotaku thing that called this like a part of the experimental period with Square. You could tell that they really go for it, and they were committed to the whole, we're going to make a game for a older audience, because, guys, how does this game start?
So, yeah, Borgmaster, go ahead.
This game begins at the opera, a relatable experience for gamers in 1998. You play as lady detective cop Aya Brea, who has been invited to the opera by some rich fuckboy because she's very pretty. So they go to the opera. They're watching it. It's a play. The lead actress starts singing an aria, and then everyone in the theater just starts catching on fire, just combusting, and chaos and panic, chaos ensue. Except for Aya, she's fine, and so she runs to the stage to investigate why the singer is making everyone catch on fire. And it's a pretty iconic cutscene. They use that cutscene in all the ads. If you've seen anything from this game, it's going to probably be that opening CG of just this, opera theater where people in like tuxedos and dresses just catching on fire and falling over each other in a panic. It was definitely like technically impressive for the time. So Aya Brea chases the lead actress backstage. There's some weird supernatural stuff happening with her, and chases her into the back rooms. Chases her
into a weird claw creature.
Yeah. The actress becomes a weird monster lady who claws at you a bit. There's a sewer section. There's a boss fight. There's some survival horror-esque wandering around an environment, looting things, and poking at everything that hasn't nailed down. And then that's the first chapter of a 6-chapter video game.
Read these chapters. I think one of the strengths of this game is that each of the chapters doesn't waste your time. The only thing I think that really poses
chapter 5
a little bit of a time sink is that original Eve stuff, which I also did, Borgmaster, but I didn't stream it.
You two are
post-game
weird.
content. The post-game content is there.
You kind of need to play the post-game content. I think that the weird story stuff actually is kind of cool.
But I already watched that. Why would I need to do it myself? I saw you do it.
Now,
but as far as the main story is concerned, I do think some parts of Chapter 5, Day 5, waste your time, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Sure, but we start to see the weird trappings in terms of what this is based off of, because when when Aya tries to confront Melissa on stage, she talks about or says something about how Aya's mitochondria isn't fully developed and it needs more time, which allows her to then flee And then we get the transition to the next day, which is December 25th. Haha, this is a Christmas game. Play this
That's
with
right.
Christmas nights, right?
Yeah, so it's not
That's
Christmas
right.
Eve, it's Parasite Eve. Huh?
Haha,
It's
yeah.
like there are multiple meanings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
But the
also
mentioning,
Parasite Eve, as in like Eve the first woman.
And or just a parasite named Eve. Because the
Or
parasite's name is Eve.
Parasite Eve, as in the eve of the parasites.
So many meanings.
anyways, so the lead for the people who survive the opera of spontaneous combustion follow up on the lead of, oh, wait, she said something about mitochondria, which leads to the question of, like, so these guys just walked out of an opera where everyone died by spontaneous combustion and, like, no one investigated them.
Yeah,
No one from any health organization did a quarantine. No federal government intervention. Just like let this opera house have
No.
spontaneous combustion and let these three doofuses leave, or two doofuses leave.
This game operates on action movie logic.
And it's good. The only part where I start to like bristle ever so slightly is when it's just dropping a bunch of like scientific terms as if it's saying things that it knows what it's saying, which might be a clunky thing that comes from what it's based off of, which is the Parasite Eve novel.
You want to talk about that?
Sure. This is a book by Hideaki Senna, who is a genuine PhD pharmacologist. He graduated from an actual licensed university. It seems like he continued to lecture. He continues to lecture on microbiology and genre fiction. So he's doing doujinshi works as well as nonfiction works that are related to his scientific research, which is just a fun little thing that he writes these little novellas. The big thing with Parasite Eve, the book, is the documentation is kind of all over the place. So whether about Senna read Richard Dawkins's Selfish Gene and kind of like got exposed to Richard Dawkins's notion of evolutionary biology and wanted to do like, what if a worst case scenario, or what if this went bad for us, or he just misread or misinterpreted it. I'm going to give him more credit and say that he probably just wanted to do some sort of like doujinshi fanfiction-y thing or speculative fiction interpretation of the Selfish Gene, considering that he is like a licensed physician. But it's essentially much more about the character of Eve being this superhero with an immune system that just allows her to deal with all of these horrible monsters. There's unfortunately an incredibly awkward rape scene in there because of course there is, and there's a much more overt metaphor in terms of the whole discussion about sperm and protozoa as a result. I'll leave it there.
There's a questionable made-for-TV movie that we might watch. Based on the book that also makes its own changes.
Wait, was it made for TV or was it actually in Japanese theaters?
I think it was made for TV. Don't quote me on that.
I thought it was a film from 97 that eventually got some sort of distribution by AD Films in Europe and the United States, but I could be wrong.
I could be wrong.
Years later.
This leads us to what we later found out someone else has already done the research for, and their name is, I unfortunately don't have it. I can look it up later. Maybe the biggest myth about Parasite Eve, which is that the reason why Square called the third game Third Birthday is because somehow they lost the rights to Parasite Eve, and the author of the Parasite Eve book hated the second game, or maybe they even hated the first game. And it turns out, no, Senna just basically signed off on these adaptations of their work, didn't have a lot of creative input, and either the quote is that, quote, actually impressed how well the game makers translated the novel in reference to the first game. So maybe just like give it like, yeah, this is good, thumbs up, fine, we're all okay, whatever. Or just wanted his money, which what can you can't blame him, right?
Yeah,
Which
any
leads to the
documentation out
conclusion.
there.
But
Well, both
you know,
talk.
it's one of those things where people have said for years, like it has been repeated as like common knowledge that it's like, oh, you know, the reason why it's called the third birthday is because he hated that second game. And as far as we can tell, there's no actual proof of that, and it might just be one thing that like someone said and then people repeated mimetically, and no one who could read Japanese bothered to check up on.
Yeah, because
So
But yeah,
what documentation there is in English, it seems that he's more ambivalent about all the adaptations of Parasite Eve. Like he
whether
signed on
good or bad,
to,
even.
yeah, like he signed on to Kadokawa Books for publishing. They got all the rights to the concept, and then they went and shopped it out to whoever to do whatever, and he got paid. And it wasn't really his problem at that point. So
Yeah.
so Square had wanted to get the license for Third Birthday, they probably could have if they wanted to pay him or pay Kadokawa, but they chose not to for their own reasons.
yeah.
So this leads to what I think is the most realistic situation, which is Square just doesn't care about this IP. They really don't. Even though there might even be a market for re-releasing this game on modern technology, they haven't bit the bullet. The people who made the first game special and or good, most of them are gone, except Nomura, who we'll talk about later. So
Nomura's too busy trying to get Versus 13,
into
aka
fucking
Kingdom Hearts 4.
So yeah, it seems more or less that the state of Parasite Eve as a franchise or series just really seems to be pinned on Square doesn't care.
Yeah, and you
Yeah,
know,
it's a
Parasite
very
Eve
dead
is
IP.
definitely it's one of
It's
those cases where it's not a franchise. It's one really interesting good game. And then there's Parasite Eve 2, which is a kind of middling Resident Evil clone that gets rid of all of the interesting things about this game with the ATB real-time combat and the more the character movement and stuff like that. And instead it's just Resident Evil.
It's Resident
And
Evil with lock on and experience points.
yeah. So it's it's and then the third birthday is a
Disaster.
goddamn
The third birthday
travesty.
is a crime. Like it might. I mean, this is
an
a
absolute train
discussion to
wreck.
have elsewhere. It might actually be the worst sequel to a game Square has ever made, like Square proper.
That's not saying much. Yeah.
They've made some pretty bad mobile games.
Yeah, but a proper sequel to a game?
Is it a proper sequel?
I mean, it is.
But no, Third
Anyways.
Birthday is an absolute train wreck for its own reasons. That should be covered. Maybe in like a subscriber incentive.
Yeah, that can be a subscriber goal if we absolutely want, but it's
No,
barely an
no,
RPG because it's a
I'm already
third-person
doing
shooter.
Y2K. You can't trick me.
So, anyways, so Aya and Daniel, who's a bit of a
her partner.
dweeb,
Her hot-blooded black partner Daniel.
Yeah, who's
which
introduced by
creative choice
punching.
there, huh?
Yeah, he's basically Barrett,
He's one day away from retirement, basically.
something like that. But no, he's
But
introduced
yeah,
by
he's
punching out
Barrett.
a reporter. Just to set the mood for their shenanigans. So Aya and Daniel go find the one scientist in Manhattan who knows about mitochondria,
Yeah,
who happens to be important later, and he
yeah.
lectures some technobabble
He
at them.
says ominous, evil things.
Yes, that they don't follow up on. Guys, don't worry
No,
about it.
they don't even bother getting a warrant.
No. And then the the second evening, where they find out that the actress Melissa was supposed to have had a singing performance in Central Park that evening. So they go to investigate, and Daniel's arm catches on fire immediately when they get
Oh
near the bar.
no.
So Aya has to go in by herself through the spooky, dark, and deserted Central
Yeah,
Park
you have to
because
go through the Central Park Zoo, but now there's a all the monster they're all monsters now.
yes, there's monster apes, there's monster birds. There's always monster
Monster
birds.
snakes.
This
Monster
is really
snakes.
the first
There's a bear.
dungeon. Like, it's
And
the
the
first.
sewers underneath Carnegie Hall
I guess so,
are
but this
That's
really
some,
does feel like the first time that the game
yes.
puts up some like difficulty stakes to the
Yes,
gameplay. Because
and
that
yeah, this is
there,
the first
just
real
easy.
area.
there is some level of Resident Evil item management, but also you can spend your bonus points to increase your inventory capacity. You can also spend your bonus points to increase your ATB charge rate or buff up individual guns. That last one seems like a waste of your points unless you've done the other two.
Yeah, you don't buff up your weapons or armor until you've reached 99 on your ATB and inventory.
Yeah, just
stats.
the ATB is the absolute priority first because again, it's not necessarily a bad system especially for a console that isn't going to be able to run true real-time combat with a stable frame rate. But do the ATB meter stuff. I can't
Yeah,
even believe that this is a choice. It feels like this
there.
should almost be a
Yeah,
tech tree where you unlock that first and then those options
yeah.
open up.
So there, I think the way the action economy works, uh, is pretty slick.
Mm-hmm.
Although in most random encounters, like you are never going to do anything other than shoot and heal. It's not a Vagrant Story situation where you need to buff yourself up constantly.
No,
For the most part, you can get away with just dumping rounds into enemies.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, all of the extra stuff you can do with your parasite energy and
Your parasite magic.
your mitochondria magic. That's
Yeah,
not really important until the back half of the game, really. Like,
yeah.
you're you're shooting, you're trying to find bullets, and bullets stop being a scarcity halfway through chapter 2. That's not a problem.
And there are a couple of other things too. Like there's the eventually we get stuff like the parasite energy stuff that you can use for defense assistance or attacks, item stuff. And when you're not in battle, you do have the option of like changing your weapon and armor attributes, and there's even effects to tool around with your
Yes.
tools and your super tools.
You can feed guns to other guns to bring over properties and stat boosts. So it's worthwhile to dump whatever attack boosts you have into whatever you're using right now, because you can bring that over to the next gun. There are, it's because this game takes place in America. There are just guns lying all over the place,
Yeah.
and there's a character who's like, people like you are the reason why guns will always be a problem in this country. And then you're like, oh right, this game was made in Japan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's a rudimentary crafting system. But your gun that you have equipped, the gun you want to feed into your gun, and like the tool item that you need to do so, they all take up inventory slots. You don't have that many to begin with, so there is a decent amount of inventory management. It's almost Resident Evil level inventory management, not quite there, but almost. That's a real horror of this game is item management.
There's a
'Cause-
little bit of that, yeah.
It does lead to you usually spending those points, those bonus points, on increasing your inventory first after you've maxed out your ATP. So at the very least, you can say they give you the tools, or at least give you an option to deal with that problem to a degree. It's not the best, but hey, there's a way for you to mitigate the problem rather than outright eliminate it.
And those bonus points you get from either end of chapter point stumps or from leveling up. But this is like a 1 to 34 level game.
Yeah.
So you're only going to be leveling up, two or three dozen times. So you aren't awash in bonus points. Like when they come around, it's a noticeable event.
Which I think does increase the odds of you can screw yourself pretty easily in this game if you really don't know what you're doing.
Yes.
Nonetheless,
Yeah.
combat good.
Yeah,
but the combat's still good.
It's very slick, and it's very, in a modern game you would have like a dash or something. You'd have some sort of built-in dodge move, but I think it still works because it is fast enough. I think that's key here, given the other Square games of the time and how sluggish the combat could be.
Yeah, compared to like Final Fantasy VII, the combat is
Yeah.
really snappy because it's in the environment itself. So the camera just kind of like frames down a bit. The enemy spawn, you run around, do the combat, and then the game stops. The camera like pans up a little bit, and then you're back in the environment. So there's no cutaways or anything. It moves pretty fast by those standards. By modern standards, it'll feel a bit sluggish, but this is PS1 game we're talking about. But yeah, so the combat's neat. It's a neat combat system. More should have been done with it. Like it should have been iterated on.
You're right. I do think they should have done more with it, but then at the same time, they didn't. Even within this series, and then in Final Fantasy, they were already thinking about, well, we got to do this and we got to do that. We got to have like limit breaks be a bigger deal in 8, and then 9. We got to throw things back to the old games, and so, yeah.
But yeah, so let's see here. Get back on track. So the combat's neat. It works well. There's some weird.
There's an element of tactics with the fields, especially. Yeah. Every single time you bring up that dome, it feels good. It's cool to look at. I like it.
There's some of that in Vagrant Story.
A dome?
Sure.
But Vagrant Story is also very much doing its own thing.
What with the dome? It
with the dome.
Okay.
Targeting dome.
But yeah, so you're walking through the spooky, scary, totally deserted. Just like real life. Central Park is just deserted at night. There's nobody there. You're walking through it. You get to, I guess, the outdoor theater where the singing is supposed to be. But I guess they're too late, and Melissa has turned everyone into goo.
Yeah.
Just the entire audience into goo. And it pulls into like a goo thing. Just a gooey thing that goos off somewhere.
Yeah.
And then you chase a ghost. Don't worry about that.
Don't worry about it.
And then you get to a carriage. Then the Eye gets to a carriage. Melissa's there in monster form, just floating next to these horses in this carriage, and invites Eye to get into the carriage, and Eye just gets in. And then you have a boss fight where you have no room to maneuver, and Melissa, which is Eve now, is just flying in and out of the screen, just shooting you with the lasers. You basically just have to dump rounds into her before she kills you, pretty much.
While there is a horse on fire.
While the horse is on fire, that poor horse is on fire, while just screaming through the empty New York streets. Yeah.
This game's conception of New York is very first off, it it takes a lot of processing power to make characters look this detailed on screen. Second, while I have to imagine there was some amount of like we went to New York and did some photography.
Used a Polaroid camera to get an idea.
We took some pictures of like the outside of the Natural History Museum. This does not see. This is a very Japanese conception of what New York is, and a very '90s conception of what Manhattan is.
Yeah, there's something a bit nostalgic to that.
They evacuate all of Manhattan in like 9 hours.
Yeah, it's fine. That's easy to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, famously uncongested bridges and tunnels coming out of Manhattan.
I mean, as you could say, to an extent, yes, but also like a giant cataclysmic event is happening in New York that's causing people to possibly leave, or die, or explode.
But if the
Who's to
cops told
say?
you that you had to leave, and all you heard was a bunch of people in Central Park got turned into a goo blob,
New Yorkers still wouldn't leave. Let's
No,
be
New
honest.
Yorkers still
wouldn't
wouldn't
care.
leave. They'd be like, "I killed the goo blob.
Oh yeah, I just
They
suffered
mess
one of
with
those
one of us.
yesterday.
They mess with all of us." And then and then they throw stuff at the Green Goblin.
I'm glad that you brought up the bosses because so the first couple of bosses are obviously easy because they're trying to tutorialize certain mechanics.
But those
The
worms
difficulty
suck.
curve with the worms do suck. I was going to say the difficulty curve with the boss battles is all over the place.
Sometimes
you
those bosses are a joke.
Sometimes the bosses are a joke, and then you get that worm boss where it's like immediate brick wall. And it's the third boss after that alligator.
I made the mistake of going into the warehouse instead of Chinatown first on day 5.
Oh yeah,
And
that's my time.
that's not how the game wants you to do it.
No.
And that crab will destroy you.
I mean, even if you go to Chinatown first and get powered up, that crab will take all of your resources. Fuck that crab.
I mean,
That
yeah,
crab
the lasers on the crab
bad.
require you to like put in some sort of actual dodging effort and picking up the cues as to like I had to get it to where like I had to use haste to dodge that fucking crab and those bubbles, those goddamn bubbles.
The bubbles.
Yeah, so and also the crab itself takes up a third of the screen, so there's very little to go besides just behind the crab. Going behind the crab is your best bet. Pro tip.
I feel like there's only like 2 bosses that even give you what feels like a comfortable amount of breathing room in the battle areas. It's almost as if like the models took priority so much that they literally put you in a shoebox with every single combat encounter with a boss.
Weird.
Yeah. Which I guess takes us to day 3, where Aya meets a Japanese scientist, Maeda. His English isn't that good. He's a bit dorky, a bit of a wiener.
He's a bit of an otaku,
but not offensively so in this game. It doesn't get bad until 3rd birthday.
No, but anyway, so
Maeda. Not bad. And also by now, Manhattan has been fully evacuated overnight.
Yeah,
it's a miracle.
It was the 90s.
It was the 90s, so
we had confidence in the abilities of the CDC to respond to disasters related to biological warfare and diseases.
And mitochondria monsters.
And mitochondria, the worst disease. And there's a bit of an odd section where you can loot a gun store and a pharmacy in Soho.
Yeah.
So that brings to something that I noticed. The game is a bit extravagant with its use of its environments.
Oh, well, because they wanted you to see those backgrounds.
Yeah, because there's a lot of different backgrounds. They're all very detailed. Like, a lot of work went into them, and they don't reuse them very much.
No.
Like, there are a lot of backgrounds in this game. Like, if you count like a room in Resident Evil, or like I guess each camera view in Resident Evil has like a background it's using. Parasite Eve has like more than that, and they're more detailed, and you go through them less. Like, it feels almost like wasteful. Like, it's very extravagant. Like,
wait, you're telling me that a video game made by Squaresoft in the 1990s
resources
is a bit excessive.
Yes, but it's to this game's credit because there's always something new. Like you're always going somewhere new. You're always seeing something new, and like it helps the pace feel fresh, even when you're randomly looting a pharmacy in Soho for some reason
3 healing items.
for healing items.
It's a little awkward, but I think that the intent is to borrow from the tradition of RPGs of take everything in these rooms, open up these chests, find everything here is yours, steal from people's random houses while they're just cooking in a kitchen.
And there's no shop in
Keep it
this
all.
game.
There's no shop. I guess I just found that this section is specifically a bit odd.
It's a bit funny because you're cops and you're looting a gun store.
It is funny, but just like you have this whole section where you're looting for resources when you have such constrained inventory, and it's just you're just on this one city block, and then you go to the next dungeon area. It's a little bit odd. I mean, I guess it's there because they expect you to have burned through everything you have on the worm and that carriage fight. But the vibes are odd. The music's great. Vibes are odd. So it's the next day. It's next morning. The 3 protagonists go back to the police station, and it's been raided by Eve. And there's dead people everywhere. It's a mess because the police station was used as was set up to be kind of like a hub area in between chapters 1 and 2, where you can save there. You can do like your inventory and item management there. And then halfway through the game, it's been overrun by monsters. Everyone's been beaten to death by rats.
Yeah,
and it's now dungeon area
Spiders.
and spider.
So between Maeda's introduction, meeting Dr. Clamp again, and this is when the game starts to really ramp up the sci-fi, not jingoism, but academic vocabulary, because it starts really ramping up the amount of jargon that it's just reciting from, again, Richard Dawkins's Selfish Gene.
But it's still very much like a
Sparks Notes
yeah
recitation at best.
It's a real Spark Notes, like, I read this book on biology, also I am not a biologist. There's an endearing quality to it where it's an attempt to try and add some scientific backing to what is very much a goofy sci-fi horror game.
I mean, yes, and I hate to sound like Pete talking about something, but as someone who actually did read The Selfish Gene, Dawkins does, even in the first edition of that book, say, hey, yo, the title is a metaphor. I don't actually think that genes are driving us and like motive or like defining our motives or our will. This title is a metaphor. It's not to be interpreted literally. I don't think that genes are actually in the back of your head telling you what to do.
Yeah, it's mitochondria doing that, obviously.
You see, in Marx and Engels' actual writings, they don't actually use the phrase dialectic.
But anyway, so the guy who does at the police station who upgrades your guns, but he doesn't like guns, he dies and then get his gun.
Yep, and then you fight a 3-headed dog. It's very sad because the dog
was like a good cop dog.
Was a good cop dog. I know. Listen, once again, it was the 90s. Cops are still acceptable.
Yes, cop dogs are good. So the goodest
Fuck
cop
you,
dog,
Paw Patrol.
Yeah, turns into a 3-headed Cerberus that shoots fire at you on the top floor. Yeah. Everyone's wounded or dead.
Yeah, the chief has to go to the hospital, and so it's up to Aya to save the day.
Figure out what's going on. To find Eve.
There's bits. Then you go to the hospital.
Well, okay, so the reason you go to the hospital.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So let's get into it.
Tell me about the sperm.
Gino's gonna hate this. So Maeda knows about the events of the book Parasite Eve. And he's like,
Mhm.
yeah, Eve is probably going to try to get some sperm to give birth to the ultimate life form. Because that failed in Japan the last time the mitochondria tried that. And it's just these characters going, okay, well, where is there a sperm bank in Manhattan? Like, oh, this hospital. You go to the hospital, and what do you know? Monsters everywhere. And that's chapter 4 is going through the monster infested hospital, looking for, because Eve is hunting down the sperm in the sperm bank, and you have to stop her from getting the sperm. You have to ask the surviving nurses where the sperm is, how to turn off the cooling system for the sperm, try to keep Eve from getting the sperm. It's all
This is
about
all true.
yeah, no. It's the back half of the game is very concerned with sperm.
You could say that
As
there's a
are
lot of
most
spunk in
American men.
there's a lot of spunk with the actions of our characters. Again, as much as this is awkward, I need to remind you that this sequence in the book involves a rape scene.
Yep.
So I guess raiding a sperm bank is better.
Yeah, it is. Let's just say that, okay?
Yeah, so does not get there in time. Eve made off with all the sperm. She just emptied the sperm
Yeah.
vault, had all the sperm in it, and left with all the sperm.
We've got a schism with our jism.
There's some documentation about how Aya and her dead sister Maya are involved with Melissa, and like there's an organ donation thing with the dead sister. They're on a list. Dr. Clamp, who they talked to originally, was the one in charge of everything. I remembered that she was in the hospital as a kid. You know, there's all these revelations. And then you find a spider on the roof for some reason.
Yeah, then you fight a weird man spider on the roof.
Yeah,
Spider battle is tricky,
it wasn't that
I
bad.
didn't
but
find it that
not
hard.
really.
It wasn't that bad. And then the military shows up finally, flying
And they
some.
get turned into goo.
Yeah, they do the thing from the 1998 Godzilla where the military aircraft weave through the skyscrapers for no reason, so they can be close enough to the monster to get killed by the monster.
So that Square can show off their CG production.
Yeah,
And
and
their ability to maintain a frame rate with motion tracking.
yeah. So the military flies way too low, weaving through skyscrapers, and they get gooified because they're in goo range. You see, if they're just at 10,000 feet, they wouldn't be in goo range. But instead,
Yeah.
they flew like on the deck in Manhattan for some reason and got gooified.
You can't turn a predator drone into bioorganic goo.
I mean, even an F-117 Aardvark, which is what those planes looked like, you know, if they're just flying at altitude, they wouldn't have gotten gooified because the goo couldn't have reached that far.
So what can I say? It's a tough nut to crack.
But yeah, so a plane crashed in the hospital. It's a big action moment. You failed. Eve has the sperm. You have to, and then chapter 5 is you just got to wander around New York in theory
Chapter
to find
5
her.
is, I would say,
Like
the biggest chunk of actual video game in this video game.
It's like a third of the overall game.
Probably.
Because there are basically two dungeons. There's Chinatown and there's the warehouse.
Oh, and
then also the
for
museum.
those of you,
3 dungeons.
for those of you, regardless of how you're trying to play this game is 2 discs, and in true Square form, let's say there's more on the first disc than the second disc because the second disc's got a lot of cinematic bullshit in it. Surprise, surprise, right?
Yeah, so
But
you
yeah,
wander
no,
around the
this
sewers in
act is the
Chinatown.
longest act. Yeah.
Yeah, you wander around the sewers in Chinatown. It's kind of a maze, but not really. I mean, it's a maze if you're trying to collect all the items. If you're just trying to get to the next area, you can just beeline it pretty fast. Yeah, the goo's in the sewers. You get the goo out of the sewers. You flush it. You fight a centipede for some reason. That boss sucks.
Oh yeah,
then
that boss is terrible.
yeah, and you go onto like the Brooklyn Bridge, like the train section, and you see the goo go to the Natural History Museum where Dr. Clamp is. I
Yeah.
wonder why that could be happening. And then you
Oh
change
my
discs.
god, the goo was
the friends we made along the way.
friends we made. No, the goo is being used to birth the ultimate life form.
Oh no, Eve's combining the goo with the sperm to give birth. Anyway, so you could go to the museum, or you could go to this random warehouse. So since you went to the warehouse too early, do you want to describe that mini dungeon?
There's it's a mini dungeon. There's a crab.
Mm-hmm.
There's a giant enemy crab that shoots eye lasers at you. It's quite difficult.
Well, not only that, but like all of the enemies there seem to be like fast, like super fast. They can cross the distance and get to you sometimes quicker than you can get to them.
Yeah, you
So
will
it's
get
not
your
easy
ass wrecked in the warehouse.
if you're not properly leveled. And even if you are properly leveled, you're also probably going to get your ass wrecked.
Yeah, and you do all that, just get the rocket launcher. Did either of you use a rocket launcher in the game?
No.
No.
You get that CM protector also, which is
Oh, okay.
fine. And the M2032? That's in
Okay.
one of those chests.
Oh yeah, it is important. Yeah. But the main thing is that the giant enemy crab drops a rocket launcher that the game seems to want you to use, but you're not going to use. You're not going to
And
use
the
it.
Not
ammo's
only
too
do you not
scarce.
have very many,
Very few rockets.
it's also just your regular gun's gonna be just good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a weird step for the game to take. But then the museum happens, and that's the final dungeon of the game, and that fucking thing's a maze. I got lost in
Yeah.
there.
I
So
mean,
yeah, we're gonna
that's just
defend
kind of
the
what
level design.
Square did for every single one of their final dungeons. It's always a maze that probably goes on way too long because it's like a boss gauntlet. It's the most quintessential like relic of the past JRPG design isms in this game. And it comes out of nowhere and it doesn't really meld well.
Yeah, because there's 4 floors. There's multiple stairways and elevators. You know, there's locked doors that have to get unlocked eventually. Like you're going in and out, and between and through. There's a lot. The museum's big. There's a lot in it. It's like the only place with like real backtracking that you do of any
Yeah.
amount. And apparently the goo has caused all the skeletons of all the different,
Yeah.
dinosaurs and Ice Age creatures to come to life with like as goo
Yeah.
skeletons,
Yeah. As one does.
as one does. So there's like some saber-tooth tiger goo skeletons who are like the common enemy there. There's a Triceratops boss fight that leads into a T-Rex boss fight.
Yeah.
For me, the T-Rex boss fight was the easiest in the game because I had unlocked the final Parasite energy ability a bit early, so I just
Yeah.
liberated the fucker. And
Yeah,
Yeah.
those abilities are your get out of dodge abilities. Outside of a handful of bosses, they basically just waste everything that's in
Yeah.
front of you. You get
And
that attack like you're hinting at Borg, where basically it is fuck everything in this general direction.
yeah,
Yep.
it's basically a summon, like as close to a summon as you're going to get. It's the last ability you get. You do 7 attacks to whatever enemy is whatever enemies are near you. The attacks hit for a lot, so you're doing like half of a boss's health in one summon, even though it takes up your entire meter.
Yeah.
But it does make the T-Rex trivial if you unlock it before you get there.
Yeah. It hits very hard. It is Omni Slash.
I mean, I'll say
It's more
Knights of
like
the Round.
Eve
But
from Knights of the Round, or like Eve from Final Fantasy VIII, where it's just like a little too long
Yeah.
when you want to use it, but everything dies outside of like the final handful
boss.
of encounters.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you play around with all the skeletons. You find Clamp. He has his big villain speech revealing he was behind everything the whole time. He had been trying to foster the mitochondria to take over the world because it deserves to, or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
He gets set on fire and dies.
Yeah.
Which rip Bozo, I suppose.
Yeah.
Then I has to go to the top floor of the building where she gets to like the goo room where Eve is very preggers, It reminds me of like the Good Room from like the end of Fear 3.
I'm nodding my head as someone who played Fear 3 and doesn't remember a thing about that game.
Well, I mean, if we're
The
talking,
last cutscene is pretty fast.
Okay.
well,
But
I'm glad that you mentioned Fear 3 instead of a scene involving a pregnancy in a different Fear game.
Yeah, we're not talking about that.
oh no, because Fear 2, the real horror is fatherhood. Anyway, so there's a big goo room with a very pregnant Eve. A goo monster smashes through the building, grabs Eve, walks off to the Statue of Liberty, and then that's the end. And then you get to the end game.
Yeah.
The end game is there's some silly nonsense that happens. Go watch
Yeah.
it for yourself. It's very stupid. But you end
People
up at
get turned into fire.
yeah, people catch on fire. Some ships blow up. There's a lot of goo involved. But it ends up at the Statue of Liberty. Boss fight against Eve. Boss fight was kind of mid, if you ask me. It's kind of a mid boss fight.
And then the ultimate being is born.
Well, no, because the ultimate being was born before that. You're just
Yeah.
fighting like post pregnancy Eve,
Yeah.
and she melts into goo. Days 1, you go back to like the Navy ship that's like off Manhattan. But oh no, the ultimate baby busts out of the water and starts wrecking Navy ships, and then final boss fight with like 4 stages as it goes from baby to child to adult to angel, two-winged angel thing. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a JRPG final boss.
it's RPG final
It's a
boss.
weird angel thing.
And yeah,
Yep.
because mitochondria.
Yeah.
You defeat the mitochondria. Final cutscene ends with like a kind of like a horror movie stinger of, oh, is it over?
Is
There's
it
a-
over? So, anyways,
it's
you
over.
basically drive a ship to blow up the ultimate being. We finally cut to Aya.
There's that chase scene at the end after the boss fight. I keep forgetting about that chase section.
Aya has to set the vessel or the ship's boiler to basically explode. So is that it's like a ticking time bomb that explodes the ultimate being on board of it. And then we smash cut to the initial ending where we have Aya, Daniel's son Ben, and Maeda, and they're going to the opera. Attempt number 2. Hopefully nobody combusts. No one combusts.
It's also
But
the
Aya's
same opera,
mitochondrial
too,
powers.
which is kind of tasteless. It's kind of tasteless to like put on the same opera.
Hey, it
where
could have been
everyone
the
died.
backup singers and the backup actors. They got to put food on the table anyway. So Aya's mitochondrial powers resonate with the audience members, and all of their eyes ominously glow. Is she the next Eve? Who's to say? Oh wait, you can figure that out by playing the end game or the new game plus thing.
Yeah.
Or we
So,
played this.
Oh boy, so
this game is not very long.
it's like 8
No.
hours.
This game is like 8 hours, which, you know, by 90s RPG standards means it's a horrible disappointment.
Yeah,
It's not
I
400
can
hours.
only. I bet that their thought process with the whole original Eve mode and the Chrysler building stuff is, well, okay,
We're getting to this.
look, we have to put in something.
We
in
don't
here
have enough time to put in more real video game, so what if we put in a semi-random dungeon that is 70 floors long?
All right, so for the listener,
Who would be foolish enough to do that?
there is a new
Board
game
master.
plus.
Well,
You can bring over some equipment and your items from your first playthrough. It makes the first half of the game trivially easy, but you also unlock the Chrysler Building. It is the Chrysler Building from New York. It has 77 floors. It is a 70. The first 70 floors of that are a mystery dungeon. With exactly 20 backgrounds that are reused over and over again on semi-randomized floors. There are the stairs you come up from, the stairs you need to go to the next floor. There's an elevator screen, and there is a storage room where you can get items. There are random encounters. Every floor is like that, different layout. There's no map, so you're wandering around. The bosses get increasingly more severe. There's 2 unique bosses. The rest are reused bosses. Fuck that crab. Fuck those cockroaches. Oh, I hate those cockroaches so much.
Well, not only just those cockroaches, that cockroach boss is the worst. It's the goddamn worst.
Because the cockroach keeps spawning other cockroaches. And so you
Yeah,
have to like do damage and time it so that you can kill them both, like the two cockroaches very close to each other, or else you just keep spawning cockroaches.
And normally the strategy with a boss that spawns a bunch of ads is, well, I'm just gonna fucking ignore the ads and just put everything into main cockroach that's spawning things. Problem with that is that they gave that cockroach like over 4,000 HP, so you're whittling away on that while these little ads are fucking you up. So you actually do need to deal with them.
But the ads
And
grow into cockroaches with 4,000 HP that can create more ads themselves after the original
yeah,
dies.
so there just comes a point, especially when I was playing it, where save state and save state mid boss. Wait, am I describing? I mean, I'm not playing a legal copy of this game. Save state and get to a point within the bottle where you feel like you can turn the corner, because there are points where when I tried to do that part where it's like, yeah, there's no turning this corner. There's too many here. This is a waste of my time. I might as well just restart.
Yeah, and also
And that's a terrible
no
feeling.
saving in the Chrysler Building. You save in the police
Yeah.
station, and you have to go up 10 floors to reach the boss. And
Mhm.
or on original hardware, if you die, you're back at the police station. Because you can't
Yeah.
use the elevators until you beat the boss, and you can use the elevators for all the floors below that boss. And that cockroach boss is like floor 50. So you've already gone up 50 floors. You've beaten, 4 bosses. And then you get there, you've put in hours. Because
Mm-hmm.
it took me like an hour and a half per set of 10 floors.
Yep.
So yeah, no, it's awful. That's an awful boss. Uh,
It's just,
yeah.
well, I feel safe in saying it. I don't think it's worth doing this mode. I
Oh,
think it's
absolutely not.
a vastly inferior
Even by
experience,
New Game Plus standards, there are
even
Square
by New
Enix
Game
games with
Plus
more going
things.
on.
And the thing is, you can't even do good grinding until you get to like floor 61, because there's not enough experience. Like because when you're like a late game, you're level 33, 34. You're not getting enough experience from the encounters in the first 60 floors for it to move the needle at all on leveling up. So you can't even grind for most of the Chrysler Building. Which, I mean, that's
It's true.
why it should be there. If you
Yeah.
want to grind in this game, and you don't really need to grind in the main story, then that's what this mystery dungeon should be for.
On the flip side, most of those bosses do give a ridiculous amount of EXP when you beat them.
Not that much.
Not as much as I would have liked, but they do give you a decent amount of EXP. The
Like
problem
that,
is that
like that crab
the
boss
start of it is not great.
That crab boss on floor 60 only gives like 5,000 experience points. It's
No. In total, it gives you 10,000 though when you do the body and the claws. Because the body gives you 6,500 and the claws give you 1,500, so that comes to a total of 10,000 EXP.
But the thing with that is, if you're like level 34, 35, it's like 10,000. It's like 100,000 experience for the next level. So that gets you a tenth of the way there.
Sure, I'm not saying that I think that it's especially good. I'm just saying that. Also, none of these bosses have anything for you to steal, so an entire mechanic becomes useless in this entire environment. So you can't procure resources from enemies
with your melee weapon
generally.
Steal on it.
Yeah.
It's so you go through all of that. You suffer for, and also to even beat the cockroach boss, you probably have to grind the lower floors for stat increase items or new weapons or tools to do the fusing. So you're going back and forth, between the Chrysler Building and the police station, and it probably is like a good 3 hours of just prep just for the floor 50 boss, the cockroaches. And if you try to get an ultimate weapon, there's a whole thing there that's like a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours of grinding you have to do for that for junk items. So there's a lot of time to waste in the Chrysler Building, and then you get to the top, and Aya's dead sister's there, Maya, but Maya is actually Eve, the original Eve. Melissa isn't the original Eve. Melissa got an organ from Maya, and that turned her into an Eve. But Maya was the original mitochondria Eve. And then, that original Eve takes over. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm the ultimate being, ha ha ha. And then it's a really annoying super boss you got to fight there. And if you're not high stat, you're going to get annihilated.
It's a gear check. That's what it is. It's a gear check. You either have the level to deal with all of its bullshit. The moves don't even have any like nuance or strategy to them. It is oftentimes I'm gonna shoot you with my fuck you laser beam because I'm that type of boss.
Yeah, there's basically like 4 moves that the
Yeah.
boss has. It's not complicated. It's just finicky, high damage, annoying, and has way too much health. Like I went in that fight with maxed out like bullet reserves. I had 999 bullets. It takes a couple hundred shots, and that's if you don't accidentally cause the boss to heal itself. So it's brutal, and then the
It's a
ending you get.
JRPG super boss.
Yes, and then the secret ending you get from that is just the original Eve and Maya originally tries to take over Aya's body, but then Maya's consciousness interferes, and Eve and Maya, I guess, annihilate each other cosmically
Mhm.
inside of Aya's body, and then Aya just leaves.
Yep.
So we replaced what I think is a kind of cool stinger that is evocative of the horror movie genre with needlessly complex technobabble
Yeah,
with
just
a
like some nonsense.
bad legendary dungeon. Don't do original Eve. Just play the 9-hour experience, end there. Pretend that the second game and third birthday don't exist. And I think that you leave with really positive feelings about Parasite Eve as a game and an experience.
Slave 2 isn't a
It-
bad game. It just wasn't meant for anyone. It just doesn't have an audience.
Well, that's
'Cause
the
it's
problem is like if you're not going to make a game that has this exact system and instead you're going to make it more of like a Resident Evil like survival horror thing, then make a different game. Don't saddle it with a game that has a very particular feel and set of mechanics. Like the other thing is like they still use the same engine. So by the time that Parasite Eve came out in like 99, 2000, like it looked bad or old or
Parasite Eve
rudimentary.
2 looks pretty good. Like those environments are way more detailed than Parasite Eve 1. Like it is an improvement, but probably not like compared to Chrono Cross or something.
Chrono Cross or even like Final Fantasy
9.
9.
Yeah.
Anyways, what a weird series. I think
It's a
we can
weird
at least
game.
agree don't play Third Birthday.
Or if you
Don't do that.
do, actually, you know what? Play Third Birthday. It is one of the worst times you can have with the PSP.
Yeah, you're gonna get horrible RSI. I'll just warn you about that.
It's going to make you sad.
It's a real bummer.
It's such a bummer. Holy shit.
There's so much to say about Third Birthday, but this isn't the place to say it.
Anyways, yeah, Nomura's a horrible pervert, it turns out. But anyways, we all enjoyed this game. I think it's time.
I
Let's
think
rank
this game
baby.
is tremendous.
Let's
I
rank
think-
it.
As someone who had not played this game before, this feels like the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting to see the ways in which I don't know, someone named Adam Borgmaster Redacted gave us shit for picking this game as if this game is a huge beloved popular game.
This game that sold 2 million copies worldwide and got 2
Listen, every
sequels.
Square game sold 2 million copies in '98.
2 million copies is like
How many?
amateur
No,
hour for Square
yeah,
during this
no.
era.
Fucking Brave Fencer Musashi probably sold 2 million copies.
This is definitely one of the higher selling games that Off the Deep End has covered.
Whatever.
Like it's up there.
I have
I'm
no
just saying
regrets.
yes, it is bizarre how this game has the reputation that it does, and also is a game that no one ever really followed up on, including Square.
It is a very financially successful cult classic.
You're a very financially
I wish.
I wish I was a very financially successful cult classic. Anyway, you can find the list at bit.ly/OTDE rank. The URL, once again, is bit.ly/OTDE rank. And number 1, we got Might and Magic 6. It's a good video game. And number 2, we got Suikoden. It's a good video game. Number 3, we got Xenosaga Episode 1. Still a good video game, even though the sequel's not nearly as good. At the bottom, at number 67, we have Unlimited Saga. At number 68, we have Hoshiwo Mirohito. And at 69, nice, we have Descent to Undermountain. So, is Parasite Eve better or worse than its contemporary Hybrid Heaven?
Yes.
Yes.
God, I love it how that's our starting point. Let's go up a little bit more than just
okay.
one.
You know what? You
Is
two
this
do
game
this,
better or
and then
worse
I'll-
than? Yeah.
Okay.
Is it better or worse than Breath of Fire 3?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
I would be willing to make the case that this is top 10 material.
Okay, let's start at 10. Is this better than Arcanum of Steamworks and Magic Obscura?
They're kind of the exact opposite in terms
One
of
is a-
scope and focus and
One is
ambition.
a tight 9-hour JRPG that gets its stuff in and gets its stuff out.
It's very
with
cinematic, whereas the other is a systems-driven, colossally ambitious nightmare
janky,
that I deeply
buggy.
respect.
I think this goes above Arcanum.
Yeah.
All right,
Please.
Ogre Battle 64.
All right. Do you want me to make this discussion easier for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So my problem with ranking this, my inherent contradiction,
Uh-huh.
is that Parasite Eve to me is better than Suikoden and worse than Panzer Dragoon Saga, which means the only two valid spots are either number 2 or number 7.
I would accept this being below Panzer Dragoon Saga.
I would go with that. I honestly don't think it's better than Panzer Dragoon Saga,
No.
even though I think that it has a better story, even though it's clunky.
It's
But
silly.
Panzer Dragoon Saga is just more awe-inspiring.
It is
Yeah,
exceptional in the sense of the word that is an exception.
yeah. It's a good Sega Saturn
All
game.
right. Yeah, our new number 7, Parasite Eve for the Sony PlayStation by Squaresoft.
Just going to point out that neither one of you bit at the number 2 suggestion.
I'm not. No.
Yeah, this is what we get for having a different co-host halfway into this feature, huh?
Yeah. Also, I
Not
don't know.
relitigating.
Suikoden 1's also pretty good as
Yeah.
like a vertical slice of Japanese RPG. It's kind of a I would say maybe a very good baseline. A platonic ideal, even though the second game's better.
Yeah.
All right. So, unfortunately, what we have next is
Oh boy.
Borgmaster. You've been on the show enough times that I said, "What if you had a pick? What if you did a thing?" And you responded with violence.
Oh, of course. Well, no, okay, yeah, okay. You don't know that yet. Now, getting it set up is a bit tricky. We can work through that. But in the year 2004, a device that was far too ahead of its time came out called the Nokia N-Gage. It was a phone that focused on video games.
Mhm.
Playing real video games on your phone? No, never heard of it. That's a crazy idea. That could never happen.
Yeah. Disgusting.
And the games actually came out on like actual like physical cards that you would put into the thing because they're real video
Yeah.
games. They're like
Listen,
40
I
of them.
played Garfield 2 Royal Adventure, so I don't trust these phone games.
But these are like it's like Tomb Raider, like real Tomb Raider.
Oh,
on
a
there.
real video game, Tomb Raider.
Like original Tomb Raider is full. Like,
Tony
full things on
Hawk
there.
Pro Skater 2 on a
Yeah,
tiny 2-inch screen on this fucking taco shaped.
A taco-shaped phone whose first generation required you to swap out the battery in order to swap in a game into the game slot.
We're going to have
Yeah.
some things to say about Nokia's engineering, even though none of us are going to be playing this on an
And if you
actual
wanted to
N-Gage.
use it as a phone, you had to hold it up as if you were putting a Choco Taco onto your face.
Man, that's the better timeline. Is if things had gone that way. So, in that,
And then we don't talk about the
Epic Games.
QD's layout and
Where you didn't have to put it up against your face
Yeah.
as if you're using a Choco Taco to your face.
yeah.
So there were a handful of RPGs on that system, including
Oh,
but not
no.
limited to Xanadu Next from the prestigious Xanadu franchise. There was an
Xanadu.
yes, of Xanadu fame. There was an Elder Scrolls game on there, like an actual first-person Elder Scrolls game in the vein of like a very limited Daggerfall almost. There were some MMOs on there, but which we'll see what we can do with that, like, including Pocket Kingdom, where they use
Yep.
Elite Speak in its dialogue because it's 2004.
Yep.
And
God.
there's some other stuff that I've been poking around, like Roots. There's a game called Roots. It's like a tactical. It's like a turn-based
Yeah,
tactical
Roots.
RPG.
I understand. Yeah. LeVar Burton.
The different thing there. And that's a weird thing that I think we should look at. There's some bad action RPGs on
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
Anyway, there's a whole grab bag's worth of forgotten RPGs on the
We're
Nokia
gonna limit
N-Gage.
ourselves to like 3 to 4
3.
games for the
Yep.
first one. And if this horrible idea does not burn us out, we'll
Maybe
consider
we'll
a
do a
second one.
two-parter.
How do
But
you feel about playing games
only
with your numpad?
oh, fuck yeah, baby.
Yeah. Not
But
since the Jaguar controller has a numpad been used so effectively in video game controls.
nonetheless,
Numpad the
only
less.
on Off the Deep End will you see,
That's
exhaustive
right, Jeremy
coverage
Parrish. You
of the
fucking hack.
N-Gage RPGs, right? Only us.
Where's your N-Gage episode, Retronauts?
Wow, shots
which
fired.
YouTube essayist is going to beat
Yeah,
us?
Austin Eruption. Where's your
Oh,
N-Gage
man.
episode?
Man, if Matt
Come on,
Ular
Grunkle Derek.
gets there like
Where's
next
your
week for some
N-Gage
reason,
episode?
Yeah, that would
like
suck.
if Noah Caldwell Gervais somehow got there before us, that would suck.
Oh God, Noah Caldwell Gervais's 16-hour video on the N-Gage.
Oh, yeah, okay, it's not Roots, it's Riffs. I keep getting that mixed up. It's Riffs, I think.
Okay.
Something like that.
Anyway, look forward to that.
Yeah. Just imagine playing a Daggerfall-looking Elder Scrolls game with a numpad.
At least it's not the Gizmondo.
I mean, we do not condone scams and actual.
The N-Gage was
I
an
know that's-
actual.
I know it's us doing the scam.
I will tell you this: talking to Marino of Giant Bomb fame, when he went to E3, Nokia had like really some of the best E3 booths at E3. Like they were
they
very
were trying.
elaborate. They were very elaborate. They were incredibly well planned out. They really did want people to think that they were making a valiant effort to get into gaming. Like they genuinely tried to make a
didn't
phone for
understand.
gamers. Maybe a little early in comparison to when, gaming phones actually became palatable. They still kind of are trying to break that crease. Turns out most people have just gotten smartphones and called it a day.
There's a monkey
But-
ball game on the Engage.
Yeah, no, Sega also put
I guess Sonic.
Sonic
I-
Advance on that game.
guess-
on
I
the
guess-
Engage.
I wonder, did the N-Gage do well in Japan?
There's
No.
there's
We need
almost
to
no
do
Japanese
that
games on
research.
here.
This is not a 3DO situation. I refuse to believe that.
No, there's like they put a Romance of Three Kingdoms game on there. It's a fighting game. It's a fighting game.
Or for one, like Dynasty
What?
Warriors.
I need to look into this.
Yeah, we
Uh,
got to do some research. If you out there, dear reader, know a thing or two about an N-Gage,
If you are a
reach out
human
to
being
us.
who owned an N-Gage when
Write
that
in.
console was relevant.
Or handheld. God, remember when handhelds were a thing?
Yeah, the Switch 2.
Yeah, Switch 2. Oh, the first two Asphalts were on the N-Gage. That's where that series came from.
Sure.
What? Oh, I guess so.
Game
Okay.
Loft.
Yeah, so this should be fun.
Yeah, we're gonna have a lot of fun.
It's going to be fun. It's also going to be a goddamn disaster.
Yeah, so tune in next time for N-Gage RPGs. If Towers 2 taught us anything, it's that the most important thing for any console is not how successful it was, but how many weird RPGs it has.
It's not last place.
I really want to see
It's-
how Splinter Cell Chaos Theory runs on the N-Gage.
Oh,
Not
I'm sure
well.
it runs great. I believe it's similar to the DS version.
Oh boy.
So thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Chris Zombify Redacted and Adam Borgmaster Redacted, for joining me once again on a video game that we actually enjoyed playing for once. Thank you to SuperSex420 for our theme song. You can find them on Bandcamp. Thank you, Gino, for being there.
Tolerated us yet again.
Tolerated us.
For not listening to this podcast before uploading it. Sperm. And we'll see you next time.
Mhm.
Bye. Oh, there's no such thing as cheating in a single player game. Fuck.
Oh yeah, there's no plugs. Oh well.
Oh, fuck. Oh,
No, it's
You
end
can
it.
find
End it. End it.
fifth generation blogspot.com. Bye.